Joining us now, he's really been following sort of the ownership situation of the Orioles for some time with the Wall Street Journal, and had been written. We talked a lot about the piece, sort of comparing it to Succession a couple of months ago, and now here we are, and the Orioles are going in a different direction with new ownership. Joining us now, Wall Street Journal sports reporter Jared Diamond. He is with us on GCR. Jared, it's Glenn in Baltimore. It's good to catch up with you, man. Thank you so much for taking the time for us.
I'm happy to do it. It finally happened.
Yeah, right.
After months and months, here we are.
I did you as all the reporting that you were doing, did you in your gut feel like it's only a matter of time that this just everything that you had gained knowledge wise about the situation, that there was just no way. There were times where we believed that John Angelos wanted to be the owner of the Orioles, but did you come away from saying it's just not plausible? There's no way he can continue to run this team.
That's a very interesting question because my mind on this changed every week,
Yeah.
which I think says a lot about John Angelos. If you know John Angelos, talk to people that know John Angelos, you could talk to five people who talked directly to John Angelos and ask them, so what is he thinking? And you'll get five different answers. Because he changes his mind all the time. He's capricious. He's mercurial. He doesn't exactly. He's indecisive. I think that's something we've learned about John Angelos over the years. When I wrote the initial story you mentioned back in December, I came away really believing he was going to keep the team, that he was totally committed to building his giant shopping mall around Camden Yards,
Yeah.
and he saw an opportunity to make incredible money. Uh, then the holidays happened. I came back, uh, talked to some news sources who told me, this is definitely starting to heat up. It was a very interesting week, the first week of January. Came back from the holidays. I was told, this is heating up. 2 days later, I got another call from the same person saying the deal's dead. And then 2 days after that, it was like it's back on. Uh, my sort of takeaway was basically David Rubenstein was growing frustrated with Angelos. A lot of fits and starts in the negotiation. It's my understanding that it wasn't until late last week that it became
Wow.
clear that this was actually going to happen. They had been talking for over 3 years, on and off, fits and starts. Uh, and it finally heated up, and here we are.
Jared, how much do we know? And you, of course, now that you've gone to the Wall Street Journal, I don't know. Trying to figure out David Rubenstein, how much do we know about him and his desire to be a winner in baseball versus this is someone who's made his money in private equity, and maybe he just wanted to be in baseball because he wanted to make profits, and baseball owners tend to make significant profits. Like, how much of that do we know yet about this man?
I think that's an important question because I think there's so many Orioles fans that are just so thrilled to be out from the ownership of the Angeloses that they almost aren't even paying attention to like who is coming in. Look, there's a couple things. I think it's important to recognize that the Carlyle Group is not buying the Orioles.
Right.
David Rubenstein is buying the Orioles out of his personal office, his personal wealth. So they're being bought by a person who made his money in private equity, but they're not being bought by private equity. They're being bought by an individual, and obviously he has other investors, but David Rubenstein's the person who matters. He is a lifelong Orioles fan. He was like 4 years old when the Orioles moved to Baltimore. I know he is a genuine fan, or at least was growing up.
I
I
did see
can't
that you
speak to.
referenced Gus Triandos in the story that you wrote this week.
Yeah,
Which,
looking for Orioles
yeah,
players, and maybe he was watching when he was
yeah,
6 years old or whatever. So he is a fan of the team. Uh, I also understand that he has a son who is in or has been in the sports industry as well, who I wouldn't be surprised if gets brought into the fold. Look, I understand that baseball is like a big profit driver, but David Rubenstein's 74 years old. He's worth $4 billion, whatever he's worth, $5 billion, whatever Forbes says he's worth. I just don't believe that at this stage in his life he would be buying this baseball team for like the sole purpose of like just bleeding it dry to make more money off of it. Like it just doesn't really track with a lot of things that we sort of know about him, what I think we assume about him. He's been trying to buy the Orioles for he's been interested in buying the Orioles for like 10 years.
Yeah.
This is something he's long wanted. There's plenty of other ways he can make money. It's also important to remember that he is known as someone that has sort of dedicated himself to spending his wealth during his life, right? He's made a pledge that he's going to spend like at least 50% of his wealth while he's still alive. He has been a massive philanthropist for lots of different causes. Like, I don't know this man personally, but I don't believe this is just like a private equity play. I do think he's going to care about the Orioles. Doesn't mean they're going to be like spending like the Dodgers.
Right.
Like they're not.
Right.
It's still Baltimore. They're still like a small market organization, but there's no reason why they should have the 29th highest payroll in baseball either. And I think just getting them back into like sort of the middle of the pack of spending makes a big difference for the future of the organization.
Jared Diamond is with us from the Wall Street Journal here on GCR. Jared, it's such a small thing, right? But knowing how much you've covered this sport, can you imagine like how refreshing it was for Orioles fans in the first statement David Rubenstein made to make sure that he laid out the priority is that winning a World Series? Like it's just not language that has been heard in this town for some time. Like I don't even look. I can't get. I have no idea how this is gonna work. Right? Like I couldn't tell you. But for this fan base to just hear someone say, "I'm telling you that's the priority." I get it. Steve Cohen wants that to be the priority in New York, and it's not working out so well at first. But just to hear it goes a long way, and seems like it should be so simple for people that own baseball teams.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Steve Cohen because it really is a great comparison in so many ways. Like the situation in Baltimore reminds me so much of the situation that happened with the Mets a few years ago, where you
Yeah.
had a sort of a long time family ownership, a family that in 2024 could never afford to buy a baseball team, right? It's almost like quaint that Peter Angelos was able to buy a baseball team in 1993. The guy was a lawyer. I know he was a very successful lawyer. He was a lawyer. The Wilpons in New York, like, were real estate developers.
Right.
These are not people that own baseball teams these days. And anyway, became deeply unpopular for various off-field shenanigans. And then sort of the local billionaire swoops in, buys the team, says, "I'm going to fix everything." Like I said, it hasn't worked in New York, but but yes, I understand the power of that language, like finally having somebody who you believe is really going to care. And like, look, I'm sure if you asked John Angelos, he would say that his priority was to win the World Series. I'm sure he would say that. But it's true, like the actions of that family would suggest that they had other priorities. And I don't think that'll be the case with Rubenstein. Like I do believe he's going to put his money where his mouth is. I do think you're going to see like, look, I don't know what's going to happen, but there's a much better chance today
Right.
that they're going to be able to keep Adley Rutschman and Gunnar Henderson than there was 2 days ago. So like that in itself is valuable.
I completely agree. I think just using the words much better chance, I think it's a great way to define all of this, and I think that's a very reasonable feeling to have. Jared, I've brought this up with a couple of people I've talked to this week. There's always an amount of trepidation for me when I'm talking about very wealthy people that even if something is working, they come in and they say, right, but we want to do it our way. And I think it's easy to say, hey, why would you want to buy the Orioles and not have Mike Elias run the baseball team? It's working. It's been fruitful. What are you doing? But I have dealt with enough wealthy people in my life that have seen things that worked and said, yeah, but I want to do it my way instead. Is there any reason that we should still wait? And does he need to come out and say, no, I need you guys to understand that I think that the baseball side of this is working and I have no interest in messing with that whatsoever?
So it's funny. I talked yesterday to someone in the front office, a relatively high ranking person in the front office, who expressed the same concerns. Like they're definitely understandably like concerned or at least curious, right? Like you said, it's not unusual for someone said I want to bring in my own guys. Like I will say this, this is me sort of just speculating,
Yep.
right? Generally speaking, I'd be shocked if you see any changes right away. You know, when you have this new group, their first priority is usually come in and let's like evaluate things. Let's see how things are working. They just won 101 games last year. They
Correct.
obviously have a great team, and I would argue should be the favorites to win the AL East again. It's wide open for them to win it again. The Yankees, I think, are kind of a flaming disaster. The Red Sox are look like a disaster. Like
By the way,
it's
Jerry,
right there.
I just need to warn you. My producer is absolutely going to quote you saying the Yankees are a flaming disaster on Twitter. Like he's definitely going to do that because that is the type of the Orioles fans will be ready to worship at your altar based on that quote.
Yeah, they're like so it's right there for them to take. So, but what I think that means, I think there's a lot of pressure on the Orioles and for the front office, there's a lot of pressure to win this year, right? But I do think if not win the World Series necessarily, but like be competitive, win the division, and get back to the playoffs. Hopefully, not get swept in the first
Right,
round.
right.
Because I think, like, look, you go into this year, Rubenstein's not going to be the owner of this team until probably at the earliest opening day, right? Like, probably it might even be longer than that. So it's not like this is going to be done in a couple of days. So nothing's really going to change going into this season. And if the team is successful again, it's like why change anything?
Right.
If they're disappointing and they fall back and they instead of winning 101 games, they win 83 and like struggle to make the playoffs, sure, I think then you may see the ownership go like, well, maybe we have to change things up, do things our way. So it just really depends. I think a lot will ride on this season. And look, to me, they're the favorites to win the AL East this year. They just have to go out and do it.
Do you think it's at all possible that like there could be an agreement in place for David Rubenstein to say to John Angelos, "Hey, until I take over, if you wanted to spend some money right now, we'd be willing to say that's okay." Like, is it possible there could be a gentleman's agreement that could allow the Orioles to make a move before opening day?
It's I don't know.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
I would hope that ownership is out there like trying to make the team better. I mean, honestly, the Angeloses should have been doing that all off
of
season.
course,
Like
yes.
how do you not want to improve on this team? Like, yes, they were amazing last year. Yes, all these young players are going to be a year older and you hope better. Yes, there's a whole pipeline of young stars right behind them, but like, you know, how do you not want to build on it? Especially after getting swept in the first round of the playoffs. But I'm not a baseball owner, and I don't pretend to understand what these guys are thinking most
You
of the time.
can't always get into the minds of these people and exactly what their priorities are and what matters to them. Yeah, I keep coming back. Like the better chance to me is the thing that I keep coming back to. That I think it's such the appropriate way to say this. We don't know what's going to happen. This can't assure that the Orioles are going to vault in the World Series winners, or that even they're going to be able to sign Adley Rutschman, Jackson Holliday, Gunnar Henderson. Like there's still issues. Two of those guys are Scott Boras clients. That you're going to be swimming uphill or upstream. I don't know what I'm trying to say. I talk for a living, Jared. But like I think just saying there's a better chance is the exact appropriate way to talk about why this is such a positive development for the folks in Baltimore.
But like, while we were talking, someone in the Rubenstein family must be listening to your show because someone with the last name Rubenstein just followed me on Twitter while while we're talking. So someone's paying attention over there.
Hey
That's
man,
funny.
I'm
Uh,
uh I'm glad they're connecting. I appreciate that.
uh, look, this is you never know what's gonna happen next, and like, and I think Dan Connolly kind of talked about this yesterday, and I think is a fair point that like when Peter Angelos bought the team 30 years ago, there
100%.
was so much excitement that they were finally out from under the previous owner. So like you just never really know. But I do believe that like things were bad, right? Like I understand why there was a lot of frustration with the Angelos family as owners, especially as time went on. So like, yeah, I think there's like reason to believe like anything is better. Can it all blow up? Sure. Like, sure. Of course it can. Like baseball is a weird industry. It's a zero-sum game. Only one team can win the World Series every year. Who the heck knows what's going to happen? Like, but if I'm an Orioles fan today, I am thinking things are better than they were before. At least that's what I'm going into this with. And if it turns out to be wrong, it turns out to be wrong. But like, I don't see why you have anything other than sort of positive feelings about where things are going right now.
At Jared Diamond on Twitter is how you follow him. We linked up his column this week of the Wall Street Journal about the Orioles sale. Jared, I've been a fan of your books. Is there one that we can plug for you today?
We can read me at the Wall Street Journal, of course. I did write a book a couple years ago. It's called Swing Kings, still out there, available where books are sold. Or just read the journal. That's also fine too.
Jared, always appreciate taking the time for us. Thanks so much for doing this morning. Let's talk again real soon, all right?
It's great. You got it, guys.
Jared Diamond with us from the Wall Street Journal. Appreciate him taking the time for us. I think that span of 40 minutes probably felt pretty good for Orioles fans. Two prominent, plugged-in people. And saying it the right way, right? Like, I really do. I keep coming back to that phrase, there's a better chance.